Hi, I'm Debbie Brown with DebbieBrownQuilts.com, and I am starting to quilt this beautiful scrap quilt that I pieced with leftovers from another project. I actually designed and pieced this quilt just so there would be plenty of space for quilting. I have basted it with wool batting so that it's going to have some nice loft. I've put DecoBob 80 weight polyester thread in the needle and in the bobbin. It's a very thin thread, has a very little bit of sheen to it, and it's going to show the texture of the quilting. The combination of the thin thread and the puffy batting will show the texture of the quilting without showing the thread. The first thing I'm going to do, since it is wool though, is I'm going to stitch in the ditch right along this seam line here. Now the thread is super duper thin, so it doesn't really, it's not really going to show much. I'm using white thread for the whole quilt. And I'm going to free motion quilt in the ditch. If I'm off a little bit, it won't matter because I'm going to quilt over it rather tightly in the background of this applique motif, so that the quilting will go into the stitch in the ditch. I've set my machine speed to slow, and I'm putting my foot on the pedal very slow, all the way down, but the machine's going to stitch slowly for me. And all I have to do is worry about stitching a somewhat straight line in the ditch. I can't quilt without my gloves, whether it's gloves or paddles or a hoop or something. I have to be able to hold the fabric. You can see that loft is getting involved here. Now that I'm in the corner, I'm going to stitch a tack stitch, bring my needle up, lift my foot up, pull the quilt away so that I have a bobbin thread hanging out underneath. I have the thread wrapped around my finger here. I'm going to go back to where I started, needle down, needle up, and pull away. It's going to pull up that bobbin thread and I'll be able to trim it. Now that I've stitched in the ditch and this block is secure, I'm going to stitch some very tiny little feathers in the background. But I need to stitch the stem first. I'm going to stitch a free motion stem. So I think I'm going to start right here above the leaf. And I'm going to do needle down, needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, and take a couple small stitches. Now I'm going to stitch kind of free motion, just wiggling around the outside. I'm not going to worry about coming down between the feathers or in here right now. So it's kind of like a big wiggle or meander. Now, this quilt is only about 40 inches square, maybe 39. If I want, I can turn it each time so that I don't have all this bulk inside the machine here. But let's see if I can stitch to the left without getting too much quilt in the way of the camera. I decided that there's too much quilt on the inside of the machine that's getting in the way of filming, so I did turn it. And I'll turn it again right about here. end here. And they're not even, it's just a big scribble. Around one more time, and now I'm ready to start with my feathers. As soon as I meet up at the end here, so I am going to start taking some feathers just down to the tip of the feather here, and I'm probably going to stop my feathers around here. So a feather in and out. Let me check and see if those are showing up on the camera. Maybe I'll get closer. Let me see if I can make this machine just a little faster to get comfortable. There, that feels great. And when I'm stitching along the edge of this leaf here, I'm going to try to stitch as close to the edge as possible because I have no intention of stitching in the ditch along the edge of my applique. And if I do feathers close to it, it should act as stitch in the ditch. And make these leaves pop up, filled with batting. Now, when I get here, I'm not going to be able to get a feather down into there, so let's see what I can do. There's too much space down there. So let me retrace and start here. And I'm now going to use the edge of that leaf as my feathered spine, as my spine for my feather. So there we go. And here I will actually do a little stitch in the ditch and retrace. This is the joy of using such a thin thread because I'm not going to get any buildup. Looks like it's time to turn my quilt. Oh, I love running my fingers over the texture of quilting when there's some good, lofty batting in there. It's just, I love that third dimension, that the popping out of the quilt of it. Now let's see if I can get my feathers all the way into this. I'm gonna say probably not. Let's see what I can do here. Okay, now I've hit the leaf. I'm gonna go work my way into the corner, stitch the rest of the leaf, come back, there we go, and continue on my merry way. I stop when I need to reposition my hands or move my quilt, stretch my back, scratch my nose, and then it's time to quilt again. So I have a couple options. I can quilt around the outside next, or I can come in and do the inside. And I don't think it really matters. So maybe I'll do a little of both. I'm going to trace between those feathers, stitch in the ditch along this, this leaf, and come down to about here, which is half the distance of this opening. So I am actually using the edge of this leaf as the spine for my feather. But I can't make my feathers too big because I have to do feathers up the other leaf just to make sure everything fits. So stitch in the ditch to travel, back around here, and fill it back in. So now I can sneak back between these feathers. Stitch some feathers along the outside. I'm going to stop here and fill in this one just the same way. So I have to stitch very carefully, somewhat carefully, around the edge of the leaf. Stem, circle, and fill in that inside. Fill in the other half. Filled that one in, and look how nicely that leaf is popping up because I've quilted tightly in the background. Let me sneak between these feathers, come back up to the spine, and do some more feathers on the outside. Really tiny ones in here, sneaking in this little opening. I finished all the feathers, and I'm really pleased with the puff that I'm getting out of the leaves and the texture that I'm getting in here. I'm sure that if this were the quilt of my dreams and was going into shows, I would have been more careful about where the retraces were and more careful about where some of the joins were. Like maybe I would have made the feathers come up and around and out and done each of the leaves first and the outside. I don't know, but I'm really pleased with it. One thing I'm noticing though is this right here, this center. I have a dot on a dot, and I want to, I am going to stitch in the ditch around the orange dot here because I want it to separate into 2 dots instead of one large one. Let me get the camera a little closer. So to start, needle down, needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, and I'm not going to make a starting knot. I'm just going to make an ending knot over where I started, and that will be my starting and ending knot. Ooh, I can tell I like that already, that I'm getting puff and puff. Oh, a little hint for when I'm quilting. I have these scissors. These are, oh, they're so old, Fiskars. I was like, I can't even remember what they are. But they're supposed to have a little lock here, and I find that that lock gets in the way, so I rip it off. And I just have my scissors sitting here, squeeze, and done. And there, I'm at the end, make a little tack stitch over top, needle up, foot up, pull away. Grab the top thread, foot down, needle up, catch the bobbin thread, pull it up, and trim. Let me pull this out so you can see what this looks like without seeing too much of my messy room. So this is the center part of my scrap quilt. Thanks for joining me for Watch It Wednesday. Check out DebbieBrownQuilts.com. Follow me on all social media as Debbie Brown Quilts. On DebbieBrownQuilts.com, sign up for my newsletter. I don't send one very often, so I promise I won't bother you a lot. And tune in again for Watch It Wednesday, where I'm going to start working my way out from the center of the quilt.